And we're live.
Welcome to the Transformational CFO, a forum presented by Williams Marston,
where we will explore innovative strategies that influential CFOs and other finance leaders deploy as they navigate critical transitions and drive transformations in these challenging times. I'm Landon Williams.
I'm John Marston, and we are the co-founders of Williams Marston. Our guest today is Matt McLaughlin, Chief Financial Officer at HealthEdge, a software development company on a mission to drive digital transformation in healthcare through connecting health plans, providers, and patients with end-to-end digital technology solutions. Matt, welcome. We're excited to have you here today and talk about your journey. Now, you went right into General Electric following school. We'd love to hear about how you started out.
Thanks for having me. I was a Northeastern guy, so I did a co-op with GE as one of my co-ops.
Awesome.
And went to work for GE right out of school. And I never wanted to be in finance, never thought about finance. I was a sales guy initially. I then got into quality, Six Sigma.
Yep.
And that led me to a leadership development program in GE called the Corporate Audit Staff, which was a phenomenal leadership development program.
Yeah.
And so I liked it, and I seemed to be doing a decent job. So they kind of kept me around for the better part of 6 years. So by the time you come off after 6 years of their finance leadership development program, you kind of have to get a finance job. Ultimately, I was with GE for almost 20 years. So I spent just under a decade at their aerospace business across a multitude of roles, kind of all over the world, which was a great learning experience. Went to GE Healthcare for about 3 years. And that's when I got into healthcare for the first time and loved it.
Right.
And then I left there in 2019. An opportunity came up to be the CFO of a small public company called Oxford Immunotech.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the challenges that I found in interviewing is it's really hard to get a public company CFO job unless you were already a public company CFO.
Exactly.
Chicken or the egg.
Exactly. So this was, I found a founder and CEO that was willing to take a little bit of a risk. So I went and did that, and it was a great experience. Loved it. We sold that company. Shortly after that, I decided to join HealthEdge, which that's my first kind of foray into private equity. And it's been a great experience. So I've been with HealthEdge for about 3.5 years now.
So what's your, I'm sure this changes depending upon what's going on at the time, but how does your day-to-day, generally, where are you focusing your time?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the reasons they brought me in was two reasons. One was to get the business ready to take it public if we decided to do that. Mm-hmm. The other was to put in real operating discipline.
Yep.
I have a great finance team. My VP of FP&A is awesome. So I'm very lucky there, as well as the controllership team.
Yep.
So I spend the bulk of my time on helping to operate the business.
Right.
So whether that's commercial deal reviews, whether it's weekly operating cadence on certain things where we have to meet more frequently than others, we have, normal monthly operating mechanisms with the 5 business units that we have. So those GMs come in and report out on all the key OKRs that we're tracking.
Mm-hmm.
Much more business outcome and customer focus than financials.
Right.
We already know their financials when they come in, so we don't have to spend a ton of time there. So that's where I spend the bulk of my time. I spend way more time with the GMs and the CTOs of the businesses than I do with anyone kind of in the finance realm.
More focused on the future of the business and the operational challenges and less on, what happened 2 months ago.
Exactly. And then I've also gotten, as I've gotten more comfortable in the space and with our customer base, I spend a decent amount of time with customers as well, which is good. It's more fun when we're prospecting than when there's an issue, but you kind of have to do both. So I enjoy that as well.
When you're talking to customers, what are you focused on from the finance side?
So that's a great point. A lot of the discussions are around, if it's an existing customer or a prospect, a lot of the discussions are around roadmap items. And look, here's how they give us a lot of feedback around, this is how you're performing. These are our expectations. Where are you investing that are going to get us from kind of here to here? So it's really good to get out and hear from, compare and contrast. A small regional health plan is very different than CVSH, Aetna, or, HCSC. So a national versus a regional, a nonprofit versus a for-profit. So to get out there and hear from them in terms of what are their priorities, and then does that match up to when I'm sitting in an operating review a month later, reviewing an R&D stack,
Right.
is it at all in line with kind of what we've committed to? So I just find that it's much more helpful to triangulate, where you get your information,
Mhm.
and hearing it from the customer is one of the easiest places to do that.
Yeah, that's great advice for new CFOs. I think something that wouldn't necessarily have occurred to most people, but making sure your company's making the right investments and being a part of those conversations has got to be pretty valuable.
Yeah, and that was actually a credit to our board chair, we have an independent board chair, and he was a veteran of the healthcare industry, very senior guy, and he's been an excellent kind of mentor to me as I got into the space and didn't know a ton about this particular space. And that was one of the things he pushed me a lot on kind of in the first year was you have to get out and actually talk to customers.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, it's great to have mentors like that. What other mentors have you had in your career that you found helpful?
There are a few that really come to mind. My first boss when I was on the audit staff, who led the audit staff for GE Company, he was a phenomenal operating CFO. So in GE, he had been the CFO of the oil and gas division before he came over to the audit staff. So he was just a really good teacher and mentor. And then he went on to become the CFO of Baker Hughes when they spun off as their own public company.
Right.
This guy, Brian Worrell, is his name. So I stayed pretty close to him. He was a great one. A few others, actually one who's a very good friend of mine. I won't mention him, but he is now the CEO of a large software company.
Mhm.
So he left GE, went and became the CFO of a software company out in San Fran, then became the COO and is now the CEO. So he's a great person to lean on and ask advice of.
That's great. I mean, we see with our clients, we have 1,200 clients we touch in a given year, and we see all different flavors of CFOs in terms of some who grew up in the audit world, Big Four, some who are former investment bankers. But it sounds like a lot of the folks that came up the way you did through GE have a much better exposure to operations and a focus on that stuff, which can be very valuable.
Yeah.
In scaling businesses.
Yeah, agreed. And it's funny when I look back on that, the place that I lacked when I came out of GE to go to my first public role is, so we were very operational focused,
Right.
but you didn't get involved in a lot of like real core corporate finance.
Mhm.
So treasury was its own function in GE, tax was its own function in GE. So when I came out and, we had to go raise debt and we
Right.
had to, there's just a lot of things that
You have to learn.
it was a pretty steep learning curve, and also making sure you brought in the right people that had expertise and knew what they were doing. But that was one gap when I first came out, and I was like, oh man,
Right.
I didn't realize I have a tax department now, and never really spent a lot of time there.
Right.
So
Yeah, some of those things take years to learn, and I'm sure having good advisors around you, investment bankers and
Yes.
attorneys and that sort of thing, really help round out your skill set.
absolutely, yeah.
That's probably a good segue to having you share some experience around Oxford Immunotech's acquisition by PerkinElmer. How did you really prepare for that deal?
Yeah, it's interesting. So we were actually in the process of announcing a deal in 2020.
Mhm.
So we had negotiated a deal with another buyer at the end of 2019. Roughly a third of our revenue was in China.
Okay.
And we were waiting on a certificate to re-authenticate our product in China.
Right.
Long story short, the certificate got held up until April of 2020. In between January of 2020 and April of 2020.
We know what happened.
Exactly. And when a third of your revenue is in China, which is where things actually started,
Right.
so the deal got blown up. And the company that was going to buy us actually then went through the roof because they had some things going on in the COVID space that they quickly pivoted and had no interest in us anymore.
Okay.
So we went from, a done deal in 2019 to late 2019, early 2020, to our stock just getting decimated in the first half of 2020.
Sure.
We recovered through the back half, and then we negotiated the deal with PerkinElmer in November through year end 2020. So my point in telling the longer story is nothing could prepare for what we went through. It was
absolutely not.
I think that the learning, though, was once that fell apart, clearly we had to buckle down and just run the business and kind of weather the storm.
Right.
And we did a really good job of that. We had the benefit of, at the time, we had zero debt. So we had enough cash to run the business. We didn't have to do anything short term.
Right.
to deal with what was going on from a pandemic standpoint. So that allowed us just to focus solely on let's run the business as best we can. We actually launched some COVID-related testing because we were an infectious disease diagnostic company. So pre-COVID, one of the largest killers in the world is tuberculosis.
Sure.
So as an infectious disease business, we pivoted, we started to do some things around COVID. And ultimately, when we started to come through the back half of 2020 and the numbers stabilized and everything seemed like we were in decent shape, then we re-engaged in a process. It was the first time I had sold a company.
Picking formal process, investment bankers.
Exactly, yeah. So picking the right bank is, I think it's critical. They have to know the business. They have to know both the good and the bad and how, a potential acquirer is going to think about the business and where are the soft spots and, how do you tell the story? And then I think the other thing was, obviously this was a strategic buyer, not a financial buyer. So just understanding the culture that they were buying into, the people that they were getting in addition to the technology. I mean, things that sound kind of common sense, but when you're doing a deal and it's 100% remote, they never came and saw our facility. We never met face to face. Everything was done over Zoom.
That's amazing.
So that part was a little bit of a challenge. So you kind of had to, develop relationships over a camera, which was tough.
Right. That's how deals were getting done back then, though. I mean, we were party to it ourselves, in addition to, certainly helping out many, many clients for the first time ever.
Yeah. And we had the unique, maybe it's not unique, but we were headquartered technically in Boston, but all of the manufacturing and the company itself was outside of London.
Right.
Hence the name Oxford Immunotech. It was started by an Oxford PhD. So the majority of the company sat in the UK. Yeah. I was here in the US along with the finance team, and that was it. Right. So you were doing it in the factory tour over there with, to your point, with a camera and showing them everything. So it's pretty interesting.
So picking the right banker, certainly focusing on, or helping the buyer focus on culture, product.
Yeah. And I think the other one that I would add is having a realistic, credible story that isn't just complete fantasy lends to a more meaningful dialogue with the acquirer. There's got to be some art of the possible in there, but you've got to be able to tell a story that holds together through 3 levels of questions. And that would be the other thing I would say, because I've seen it, I've been on both sides of them where it hasn't worked out.
Sure.
By the nature of what we do, many of our clients are dealing with challenging situations. That's typically when we get called in. Either it's a situation where there's hyper growth or some other change going on, transformation. You've been successful in a number of CFO roles. How do you prepare for a new CFO role, and where do you focus your time in the first 90 days to make sure you're highly effective?
I'd say a couple areas. You have to learn the industry and gain credibility as fast as possible, particularly with the leadership team. Right? You can only sit in so many operating reviews and not know what the hell anyone's talking about for so long.
Right.
So you've got to spend. So to me, it's the first 30, 60, 90 days is spending time with people in the business that can explain to you how the business runs, how the technology works, why it matters, what customers care about. So I spend a ton of time both with the leadership team themselves and then a layer or 2 below them. Right. Because those are the folks that obviously that's where you find people that have been there for a decade and kind of know
in the
background.
trenches.
Yeah. But it takes a lot of time. Right. I mean, you're just because you still have to do a day job.
Sure.
So that's where I find I do the most learning.
Yep.
To my earlier point when we were talking, I think getting out in front of customers, but doing so there's a difference between getting in front of a customer in day 60 versus year 3. Right. In day 60, you can get in front of one and say, hey, I'm brand new.
Right.
I'm just trying to learn. Tell me, what do we do well? What do we do poorly? Why do you use our competitors for some things and us for others?
Right.
Like you can ask a lot of dumb questions.
Not in year 3.
Not year 3. You have to be much more subtle when you ask them.
Right.
I told you that last year.
Exactly. In the early days, you tend to find that, people are open to sharing and love to talk. And if you're asking someone a question about what they do and how their business runs, and they typically like to talk about it.
Right.
So that was the other thing that I found to be very helpful, was to just get in front of as many people as I could.
Let's think about other sort of leadership philosophies, thinking about more broadly to the team itself, right? And what have you carried from some of that operational focus, that customer focus to your leadership philosophy?
An observation that I've had over the years is the finance folks that tend to do well and succeed and advance are ones that do a lot of the things that I was talking about, which is they don't just report a number.
Mhm.
I mean, it's very easy to sit there and say like, well, here's the variance between, this quarter and last quarter. It takes a lot more work to then understand, okay, well,
Why?
now walk me through why. And
Right.
you might have to go back to a year ago and understand what was going on in the world a
Ben,
year ago.
sure.
You have to get in and understand the underlying the relationship of the business and how those drive the numbers. I think the other one is I was really lucky at GE that people, particularly on the audit staff, you're given kind of outsized responsibility early.
Mhm.
And in some instances you screw up, in others you succeed. So, but either way, it's not the end of the world. And so I've always been of the philosophy that if someone's willing to do the work and they've got the aptitude, you give them more responsibility early with the right level of help and oversight. But I think that's the most rewarding for, an early career finance person. And especially in a smaller kind of fast growing business like Health Edge, there's less movement available because it's a smaller business, but you can create bigger roles kind of quicker because, we're pretty nimble.
That's something we've seen in our company, and we hire top rated people out of public accounting firms. And
Yeah.
one of the things we've learned over time is what really activates them is learning. And so they just want, they want more responsibility. They want exposure to more complicated situations that they can develop more quickly. And it's been critical to our attracting the best talent and retaining them.
Yes.
And
Right.
keeping them happy and motivated and progressing in their career at a pace that they like.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is, particularly in a small business, or smaller business, I think about the different acquisitions we did. We weren't staffed for some of those acquisitions. So bringing in people like you and your teams when our team is overwhelmed, being able to kind of make quick decisions and say, okay, I understand. We have to go recreate financials for a company we just bought that did everything on QuickBooks.
Right.
We'll bring in a third party. They're going to help. They'll get ingrained in the business. They'll work with us for 6 months, and then we'll take it over. So being able to do things like that and showing the team that, hey, we're supportive and you don't have to work every night, every weekend for the next year to figure this out. We can afford to bring in some incremental support. I think that's the other thing.
Right.
But you have to be smart about that because otherwise you're going to lose
Right.
the people that you want to keep.
Burn out the talent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Matt, a lot of our client CFOs tell us their biggest priority is getting their businesses ready to scale. Obviously, you mentioned acquisitions. How do you approach that, especially if there's a finance transformation necessary to get the company ready?
Yeah. It's never easy. At Oxford, when I got there, one of the things they had said was, we need to implement a new ERP system because we operate the manufacturing operations on a system that no longer exists. Well, it wasn't a massive investment, but it was a couple $1 million.
Yep.
Right.
Clearly, like there's cost avoidance, there's all these things, but
Sure.
it's like, this is a tough one. Like there are things in life you just have to do that might not have a concrete ROI.
Mhm.
So that was a good example where, we did it, we bit the bullet, we actually went live and it was a success. Things like that, making sure the systems are in place and the underlying IT infrastructure. I think that's one. The one where I tend to spend a little bit more time is, particularly now in a technology-based company, is do you have the right level of operations and support to bring on the number of customers you think you're going to bring on, right? Because if you go out and sell all this stuff and you can't get them live, or they get live and they're dissatisfied, that spreads pretty quickly in the industry.
Yeah.
You always want the sales guys going out and selling as much as they physically can, but you need to make sure you're investing today to support the growth. And that can make the margin profile less than desirable.
Certainly.
How do you think about M&A from that perspective? Just getting the company ready to integrate, and how long have you taken to integrate acquisitions in the past?
The biggest learning I've got is get the easy stuff done first. Like it's, systems relatively easy, all the support functions very easy. So integrate finance and legal and HR, and you can do all that stuff relatively quickly. That I think the harder ones, and where we've had some success and we've had some failures, is around the customer facing side of the business. And the businesses that we've bought are founder led businesses.
Right.
And they tend to be the people with the customer relationships. They were the one that had the idea. They have the passion. They hired the whole team. So figuring out, having a plan either to bring that founder into the fold to stay with the business, or having a very clear and transparent transitions. So we've got examples, I think, where we've done a really good job of that. And I think we've got a couple examples where we didn't.
Right.
So I think my view is get all the easy stuff done first, get the integration stuff, the things that impact the most people. So payroll, benefits, get on the same email system, get that out of the way. And then you can focus on, what do you want to do with the business?
The more meaty aspects, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Require more.
I'll give you an example. In July, we hired an enterprise-wide CTO. So the way we had been running the business, which I think was right up until a year ago, was each GM of the business unit had their own technology team. And we did not have anyone sitting across the top to drive an integrated technology platform.
Right.
I don't think we were mature enough to do that 2 years ago. We made the decision to bring in an enterprise-wide CTO and move all technology under this role. And I think it's going to have a transformative impact on the business longer term, because now you're talking about truly integrating the platforms. But if we tried to do it 3 years ago, it wouldn't have worked.
Right.
It was too soon, and we were too immature in some of those platforms.
Right. That's great.
That's a great amount, of value add. What, in that example, what role does your group play, the finance group?
I think, the broader group was kind of structured the same way the business was. I obviously spent a lot of time with our CEO and the board talking through pros and cons of doing it. But once we made the decision to do it, I had to align my group to match the new org.
Right.
So we created a new role supporting the CTO. He went from having this role didn't exist to there's 800 people in the org now, in a 1,700 person company.
Incredible.
So that's how many people sit in the technology group.
Wow. Right.
Then that makes all the other roles, kind of the business support roles, change as well. We've had to change how we support them from an accounting standpoint, all the nitty gritty back office stuff that nobody wants to talk about, but
it's got to happen.
Takes a little bit of work. Yeah.
That's a great example of really integrating into the business. And back to your previous point, getting to know the deep operations of the business and really spending the time, right? Not just yourself, but encouraging your entire team to spend that time with the folks.
There's been a lot of news lately about the healthcare industry and new administration coming in, renewed focus on government spending and chemicals in our food and these sorts of things. I think something like 70% of chronic disease is preventable through diet and lifestyle changes. What's your view of the industry just at a macro level? Like, what are things going to look like over the next 5 or 10 years?
It's a fascinating industry. At times can be depressing, right? Because it's extremely slow moving. You look at, it's funny, the companies that we look at from an M&A standpoint, or if you were to sit down and talk to a VC, like there is innovation and technology all around the healthcare space.
Right.
Some really incredible stuff. Getting it into a health plan is really hard. Typically, they tend to be risk averse for many very obvious reasons, right? You're dealing with some of the most sensitive things that exist in terms of someone's life. So they tend to be a little bit risk averse, finding the right use case, doing a pilot. I mean, you're talking about years and years. So, you get into like, well, how is AI changing things? It can have an immense impact, I think, on the system. But it's going to take a long time in order for it to do that. I think the industry, in terms of itself, it'll be interesting. It's the largest budget item there is if you take all of healthcare together.
Right.
Clearly, there's a want and a need to curtail some spending. You've seen a lot of the large plans in the last year talk about costs have gone up massively, particularly on Medicare and Medicaid. Right?
Is that driven by just demographics or
Primarily demographics and utilization. So there's still kind of a hangover from COVID of people not getting the treatment that they needed. And now, whether it's now they're catching up or because they didn't get preventative treatment, they're
sick.
Exactly.
Right.
So I think you're seeing a lot of that. And you can see it in any earnings call that you listen to for any large public insurer, right? So they need to better control cost, obviously puts pressure on any of their partners that are doing business with them. And then I think the demographic point is an interesting one, which is at some point in late 2020s, early 2030s, right, the boomer generation will peak.
Mhm.
Yep.
And then you'll start to see utilization and need come down.
Right.
And then the question is, do you then deal with a demographic that's more open to using digital tools and getting healthcare in a different way
Mhm.
than maybe the current generation? And then how does that change the delivery of healthcare, right? So I just think there's a lot of ways that we can be more efficient. Part of the issue is, are the consumers of the most healthcare dollars willing to embrace it?
Right. And then we think about that next generation, right? They're going to be far more adept at using that. And then, really leveraging things like wearables and,
Yes.
other really advanced technology that could really help with the delivery and the feedback.
And preventative care, right? I
Right.
mean, I wake up every morning with my Whoop band and it tells me, how's,
Same here.
all these different metrics and an
Continuous
Apple
glucose
Watch or whatever.
monitors.
Yeah. Which is great. I think it's going to ultimately make the population healthier, I would think, but the data will prove that out, I suppose.
I feel like it's made me healthier. I'm sure.
Yeah.
So, obviously we work a lot with CFOs and controllers and their auditors. A lot of our controller clients are, very focused on getting to the next level, getting to the seat that you're in. What advice do you have for a controller that wants to become a CFO?
I think within their current role, you've got to find some interim work, projects, initiatives, whatever it is, that they have the opportunity to prove out some of the skill sets that will be needed in order to take that seat. So I think if you just stick them in their current role and say, hey, I hope you can continue to improve and develop, it's not going to work.
Mhm.
That could be, hey, I want you to sit in on every commercial deal review so that when we go to start negotiating a contract, you can weigh in on what are the pros and cons of how this contract is being laid out and how does it impact how we're going to be able to bill, rev rec, et cetera,
Mhm.
right? So that would give them a view into the commercial world in terms of what's going on out there.
Right.
It could be involving them in, instead of just the quarterly close meetings where it's walk me through the balance sheet and let's go through the variance analysis and what the auditors are going to see. It could be, I want you to participate in the actual business report outs
Mhm.
where we're walking through the full operating review. I think giving them more of an active role in the audit committee to kind of understand what it's like to sit in that chair and have to, own that discussion. That's an easy one that you could give them. So I think that's it. And usually it's more of a function of they need to ask, like, because, there's only so much you can think about in terms of where people want to take their career, and you need to have those discussions, but they need to show an interest and say like, hey, I'd like to ultimately do this, whether it's your job or someone like you at a different place. Like, what do I need to do? And then I think it's pretty easy to put a plan together.
Great advice. And, I'm sure everybody would love a mentor like you. So that's great.
That's the fun part of the job.
It is. Well, Matt, thank you. Thanks for all you've shared. We have one last question before we wrap up, one that we ask all of our guests. Tell us about the best advice you have ever received and the person who gave that advice to you.
Oh, that's a good one. I would say, so Shane Wright was the CFO of GE Aviation, now GE Aerospace, for probably close to a decade. So he was my boss for a while when I was there. Great guy. He's since retired. And his advice to me, we were going through a performance review and talking about, a host of different things. And someone had gotten a job, and I was a little curious because I probably wasn't ready for the job, but I just asked them like, hey, walk me through the thought process behind them getting that job and what maybe do I have to do different. And his advice to me was just execute on your job. Like, don't overthink you need to then do that job because it'll get you that job and then it might open up this. He said, if you just execute on your job and do the greatest job you can do, you'll be noticed and everything will work out just fine.
Right.
Now, that's not to say you don't want to advocate for yourself and have at least career discussions, because you have to do that.
Of course.
But you can't get distracted by all these other things going on around you. So it was really a good wake-up call just to say, just do what you're doing and do a great job and we'll take care of it.
That's terrific advice. Matt, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. We're big fans of yours and we appreciate you joining and talking about the journey.
Great. Thanks guys.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today on the Transformational CFO podcast, where we explore the evolving role of the CFO and the strategies for a successful path forward.
We look forward to having you join our next podcast as we continue the conversation with inspirational finance leaders.
The views expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect WilliamsMarston's views. It does not constitute accounting, tax, valuation, or other professional advice or services by Williams Marston, and it may not be relied upon for any purpose. This podcast may not be reproduced or republished in whole or in part without the express written consent of Williams Marston.